Good evening and welcome to ongoing election coverage from Town Meeting Television. Today we're welcoming uncontested candidates in Burlington's school commissioner election. For this round of elections, the North, South, East, and West districts, all unopposed, will be on the ballot. Today I'll be joined by Kathleen Olwell, who's the Curriculum and Personnel Committee co-chair, and Jean Waltz, the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee co-chair. Also on the ballot will be Jeffrey Wick and Kendra Sowers, who are not able to join us this evening. And this will, you'll be voting for 4 of the 12-person Burlington School Commissioner seat. So this is one of the many forums that we're bringing you in advance of local elections on Town Meeting Television. And of course, Town Meeting will take place on that first Tuesday in March 2nd, 2021. Town Meeting Day is that time where Vermonters go to the polls and weigh in on local government representation, municipal budgets, school budgets, local ballot items, and all of the candidates that will be on ballots have been invited to participate in Town Meeting Television's election forums. We're seeking to introduce you tonight to some of the key issues and the candidates and their thoughts and ideas, so you can go to those polls informed. You can also participate tonight by calling in at 802-862-3966. Again, that's 802-862-3966. And we welcome your calls. If you're watching this on the 19th of February at 5:30 or about there, please note that when you do ask a question, we'll frame it to all candidates. Everybody will have an opportunity to answer. Since we're not in direct competition, so to speak, tonight, we'll give candidates a couple minutes to answer each question and rotate through a number of pre-selected questions for folks. And everybody will open too with a 1-minute opening statement. So again, we welcome you to Town Meeting Day forums. Hope you've made your plans to vote, and tonight we'll dive in and welcome our 2 candidates for Burlington School Commission seats. Kathy Olwell, welcome. Jean Waltz, welcome.
Thank you.
So Kathy, we'll start off with you with an opening statement to tell us a little bit about why you're running and the experience has been on the board so far and what you'd like to do if you're reelected.
Okay. Well, hello, my name is Kathy Olwell, and I'm the East District candidate representing wards 1 and 8. I live in Ward 1 and have been on the board for 4.5 years. I've been on the Curriculum Committee and Personnel Committee, as I co-chair those both. And I've also been on the board back in the 90s for 3 or 4 years. I am, besides being on the Curriculum and Personnel Committee, I also often go to the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee. And I've also been working on the Weighted Study Coalition, which comes under the Finance Committee. So I'm running for a 3rd term, as I am very interested in the path our new superintendent, along with the community, will take the district. And from what I have seen so far, I'm very encouraged. So I'm looking forward to joining with the community and deciding in the next half year or so where they want and the administration want to take the school district. I find that a very exciting thing to do with the community. And so that's why I've re-upped for another 2 years.
Thank you, Kathy Olwell. Jean Waltz, we'll go to you next.
Hi, my name is Jean Waltz. I also go by Jeannie, no preference. I represent the Central District, which are wards 2 and 3, which would be the Integrated Arts Academy and the Sustainability Academy. And I've actually lived in both Ward 2 and 3 for 30 years now. And I've worked in a lot of the different schools. My first jobs in the late 80s was working at Burlington High School in the Diversified Occupations program. So I've been involved with the schools for a while, but I teach at a private nonprofit school called Rock Point, and I've been there for 21 years. I also do this thing called the Ramble, which is the celebration of creativity and community of the Old North End. And unfortunately, with the pandemic, we've been on a hiatus, but yeah, I've been coordinating that for a couple of years, and also, but I've been involved with it since 2004. This will be my third time on the ballot. I actually first got elected through special elections when somebody left early. And so this is like my 2.5 year. And I am re-upping mostly because I feel like I just am getting my feet wet. There is a tremendous learning curve that goes along with learning everything. I mean everything about how the school runs, everything about how these meetings operate. There's a lot of different layers of understanding how you can implement change. So, and also understanding what needs to be changed. As Kathy mentioned, I've been a part of the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee. I've only been co-chairing that, I think, since last April. And also, like Kathy, joined the Weighted Pupil Study Coalition. And that's basically like having another committee, but it meets weekly. And yeah, that's probably about a minute long. Don't want to take up too much time.
Thank you. Great. So extensive community involvement in both cases outside of your participation on the school board as well. Impressive. Can you tell us a little bit about the school budget? Do you support the budget as it's presented on the ballot? And Kathy, we'll start with you this time.
Yes, I do. I totally support it. We've worked both the administration, the staff, and the board in going from what was in the beginning, sometime in January, it was sitting at 13% increase in school budget due to the funding that we were not getting, I guess, and that we had to make up. And we culled it down to, at the moment, it's at 6.88%. So I feel like we have done everything imaginable to pull it down as far as we could. We have gotten word that most likely what the taxpayers will see on the ballot will be even less than 6.88%, because there should be more money coming from the state, but we are not sure how much. So what it is on the ballot is 688, but what people will see in their bills will probably be less. So, and I feel like we have done it without touching children, as not having to cut staff. We've cut empty positions that haven't been filled or couldn't be filled, but we have not cut staff at all in this budget.
Thank you, Kathy. And Jean, how about you? Do you support the school budget as presented?
I do very much. And so Kathy talked about more or less the deductions or the conservative part of the budget. So that's a perfect opportunity for me to talk about the additions. And one being something that the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee worked really hard to bring awareness around and to drum up support. And hopefully we'll have a policy in place this summer around the multilingual liaisons being a year-round position. I don't want to go too much into it, but basically these folks work year-round, but they weren't compensated for that. And obviously that felt just not morally, more than morally incorrect, but also we need them to be available, especially during the summer when all of this planning is taking place. There's no way to have all of those things happen in preparation for kids starting school in the fall without their expertise, their skills, and they're just such a huge part of the educational community. It seemed basically what the committee wants to do is essentially solidify their role and strengthen it and create more stability and more predictability for them as employees, but also for the educational community. And then the other thing is supporting the superintendent crafting or organizing a strategic plan. And I, like Kathy, have really appreciated our new superintendent's everything. I want him to stay. I want for us to, as board, but also as a community, to support his work and his vision. And that funding is going to do that. And I think it's really important for us to sustain leadership. I mean, especially after some of the, I'm sure, we're going to get into it at some point, but this is really important for us to talk about retention.
Right. So great reminders to voters to educate themselves both on the candidates on the ballot, but also the budget as a whole. Something we've all said quite a bit this year is unprecedented. I imagine the education world's been no different in that regard. Can you talk a little bit about pandemic learning? What impacts has the pandemic had on learning and the students for students in the Burlington School District? And what would you, in your role in the school board, do to address those impacts? Hopefully not too much longer, but what do you think needs to be done there? And Jean, we'll start with you first this time.
Well, of course, we have so much hope in going back to in-person learning at downtown, BHS downtown, former Macy's. I want to acknowledge how heartbreaking it's been for parents and how negatively affected some of our students are. For those that weren't involved in the sports program in the fall, it was pretty hard to get them to have that outlet during the day that kind of not just fostered a sense of community, but got them out of their own head and out of their pajamas. So yeah, there's, I mean, how things are affecting kids. Of course, it's a concern. Of course, we're doing what we can. And of course, what we can do is really limited. So just moving forward with whatever we can. Obviously, the board is supporting any kind of recommendations that come down from the cabinet or the leadership folks. There's been no hesitation to support any kind of change or implementation that is going to, further their experience. Like, for example, looking at Edmonds to have the high school kids there on Wednesdays. Does that answer? Was there a second part to that question?
Oh, I think you got at it. Maybe We'll give Kathy a shot as well and see if we tie those together. Kathy, education in these pandemic times.
Oh, well, I think the pandemic has certainly made it very hard being online, and having kids on screens for all day is not exactly a wonderful thing, especially for real young children, but they've been doing it, and many of them have been in school for most of those 4 days and 1 day at home. For the high school kids, they were really on the screen all day long, and that was very isolating. I think it was also for them, we are seeing psychological effects on the kids from this pandemic and from how school has been. And I think those are things that we probably will have to deal with as we get back into in-person school, because schools are kind of the center of the community. It is where kids who don't have enough to eat get food, 3 meals a day and a snack. It is where they see a dentist often or go to a dental clinic. It is where they see the nurse who works with them. There are the social workers and the psychologists there. And so not being in person is really a problem. And also only being there 4 days a week and then at different times is also problematic. They're getting less probably than time in the classroom than they usually would have. So I can imagine academically we will also have, makeup or at least supports that need to be put in place for the kids after that. But hopefully the funding that comes down from the federal government because of COVID, we will have the funds maybe to do some of those supports, both psychological and academic for our kids.
Great, thank you both. Does that feel like we covered that topic? That feels good to me.
Just one little thing I should add. At some point, well, I think it's beginning, the state is requiring districts to come up with a recovery plan. Believe that these are the things that are going to be addressed.
Yeah. Great, so something to look forward to for folks too. Jean, you mentioned Macy's, and there's a nice sign, I think, hanging right now saying future home of an education center. So can you talk a little bit about the school construction and bonds? Should we build a new high school or rehabilitate the old? And what's being done to investigate the safety of the other aging facilities and buildings in the school district? And go ahead.
Do you want me to talk about Macy's or you want me to talk about the old?
Well, I was just referencing that generally, but yeah, no, go to the bonds. And you can touch on both if you like. The question specific to the bonds, but please feel free to touch on both. I think folks would be interested in both. Yeah.
I definitely can't speak to the bonds. I am not the numbers gal. Although I want to thank the voters for supporting them. But what's going on North Avenue is still pending. There's no way to really move. I mean, things are moving forward in the way that, of course, everything that goes along with making sure that the land, the buildings, whatever, what parts of them are viable or not viable, eventually what is going to have to be remediated, at what level, at what cost, all of that has to come in, I think, before. It's almost, it is not a good use of our time to think about what ifs, right? We have to wait until we have that concrete information to move forward with re-envisioning, redesigning, rebuilding, whatever that is.
Kathy, you want to pick up that thread?
Sure.
Oh, and just very quickly, while Kathy's answering, I'll remind folks you can call in at 802-862-3966 if you've got a question. Okay, to you, Kathy.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that's true. I feel the same way. We have to know what's there and how much it's going to cost to get rid of all the PCBs on that campus, and then we can see whether it's worth it to go ahead and remodel or build and remodel the former plan, or if we have to totally build new. That we can't say right now. But as far as our older buildings, we passed, and this, it's my age is showing, but I think it's $3 million a year, but I can't swear to that. This is awful, a bond to redo all of our old structures because we've known that. And so we have been doing that. And I know for a fact that if we're looking at PCBs and how much of them are in a building, if that's what the question is about, we haven't tested them, but we have taken out windows in most of our buildings, which is the caulk around the windows is where, and put in new windows in a lot of our buildings. How many exactly, I'm not sure, but I know there are many of our buildings that have gotten new windows, new facades, new flooring, And I know that back in the 90s, we took out every single light fixture in all of our buildings and replaced them with the ones that, and now I know there are PCBs. Back then it wasn't clear. It was that I think Burlington Electric was asking us to switch them out because they use so much more electricity than the new incandescent bulbs did. So they took out, and with that came out those ballasts, which were full of PCBs. So we know those are gone. So yes, there's more to do. And, you know, at some point, 5 years ago, I think Champlain was tested and was found to be safe. So but that was some big federal thing where they were coming in each school district, just looking at one school. So hopefully we can look at air testing our other buildings as time goes on, but that too is very expensive. And if we're doing all this remodeling and the taxpayers have supported that, thank God, there will be less PCBs in those buildings.
Aging infrastructure challenges.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So we've got about 10 minutes left. A couple questions I'd love to make sure we touch on are the racial justice question and also the question about school safety and resource officer. Kathy, let's start first with the school safety issue. Do you support school resource officers, and why or why not?
I do not support them. I mean, I support them as far as the people that we have had have been fine. It's not that. It's that I've worked for years now with youth in this city. I started the new North End Youth Center and the Miller Center, and I have also started an after-school program at Hunt and the big middle school summer program between Hunt and Winooski, for all Burlington middle schoolers and Winooski kids. I find that we need to have a very good working relationship with police, but I don't believe that police need to come into youth facilities or schools with bulletproof vests and revolvers. These are children, and I know that across the country in all the school shootings that it's never been that the school resource officer has been the one that has saved anyone or whatever. And not that I'm not belittling that. They're usually not there where the person enters the building or whatever. It's not that I'm dissing what they do. I just feel like we're as safe if we put good locks on the doors and put video cameras out front so we know who's coming into the building and they can't come in without being let in. I just feel like guns don't have any place. And I know we work with many kids that have come out of war zones. They have much trauma. And I know that the uniform and the gun both are things that terrify them. So I would have no problem with resource officers if they were not in a uniform and did not carry a gun openly. All right, I don't think they need to carry them at all in a school, but.
Jean, can you pick up that thread for us on school resource officer?
Yeah, I think, well, first of all, there was a task force or a safety task force formed with community members, and they spent, months together meeting and researching and came up with recommendations for the district about the student resource officer program. And we're going to hear about that soon. The final report was just made. The district is obviously looking it over. Then it's going to be presented to the board, and hopefully we're going to see what they find. But I personally, well, first of all, I just want to say I really respect hearing from experts. Of course, I have my personal opinion, but I do need to put a little bit of that on the shelf to hear about what does safety look like in the district. And, you know, I don't know what that means, right? So, but I personally want for the district to invest more in restorative practices and community justice and anything and like non-punitive systems. I just, if there was a way to take shame out of educating students in any way, shape, or form, I'm for it. And I totally understand feeling uncomfortable around police officers, even though I've worked closely with police officers as part of like getting permits and stuff for the Ramble. But you know, overall, sorry, they need to do some community building before they've got my you know, not feeling self-conscious around them feelings.
Maybe not unrelated. Jean, you mentioned your participation on the Equity and Justice Committee, and it sounds like Kathy, you're almost a de facto member of that committee, attending a lot of the meetings. Can you talk about the work being done around racial justice? Where do you see the opportunities for addressing racial justice in the school system? And how do you see the board and your participation being part of meeting that challenge? And do you support the raising of Black Lives Matter flag at the Burlington school campus? So a couple components to that.
Kathy, you want to go first?
Okay.
I can go.
Well, but you're the.
Yeah. I mean, the things that basically the committee is working on developing policies, especially one around anti-racism and addressing systemic racism in the district. We're working closely with the Office of Equity and doing whatever we can to support their mission, which is brand new, not necessarily brand new, but has been revised, is now on the district website. Mostly some of the details we're working on are strategies around hiring and retention of BIPOC, especially classroom teachers is kind of a focus. But of course, everybody, I mean, every staff position. Yeah, I mean, it's a very involved, obviously there's everything overlaps. So when I talk about hiring and retention, I also talk about, you know, what we're thinking of is the classroom teaching staff should be a reflection of our student body, which also feeds into having the kind of environment that is supportive to students, right? Having that also feeds into, we want to support student voice, which feeds into, we want students to be a part of this hiring process, right? So there's a lot of little details, but the overarching goal, the main things are about somehow about many different facets of creating an anti-racist environment where students feel heard, supported, and are an integral part of the process.
And just quickly, Jean, before we bounce over to Kathy, what about the raising of the Black Lives Matter flag?
100% in support. There's, you know, and unfortunately we need that reminder that there are unconstitutional things happening every day to people of color, and the flag is there, right? The American flag is there, and that's supposed to remind us about our democracy. Well, right on there is a reminder of all the other, the democracy failing, essentially. So yes, of course, we're in, the board unanimously is in support, but it wasn't just this symbolic thing. It really, there was curriculum and programmatic things that happen at every single school around the raising of the flag. And yeah, I really want to thank the Office of Equity for implementing that. It was genius stuff happened, if you ask me.
Kathy, let's go to you. Racial justice and the role of the board in ensuring equality in the Burlington School District.
Yes, well, much as what Jeannie has said, but also I I very much think that we as a district, but we as a community really have a whole lot of work to do still. And I think it happens best probably in small groups that are manageable, that people are discussing with one another these topics. It's something, our history is such that this country was grounded on the backs of our slaves. I mean, we would not be the wealthy country we are today had we not had slaves and had we not had also the work of the indigenous people of this country in the beginning. And until we as a country acknowledge that and really teach it in schools, not the whitewashed history, but the real history of this country and what has gone on, will we ever be able to live together equally? And and it's a lot of work, having grown up as I told you, in the Jim Crow South in the 50s, and moving then from there to Germany as a 22-year-old in the 70s. Both countries have a very heavy background on what they did to people during different regimes. And I think we all need to recognize that, do reparation for that, and apologize for what we've done. So yes, in the schools, we have much work to do, but that will never be done or finished until we as a community, Burlington, takes this by the horns and really works on it. So that's
great. That sounds like a wonderful statement for probably a number of issues, and we could spend all evening, I know, diving further into all of the great work going on by the school board. Want to thank you both for joining us tonight. Want to thank folks at home for joining us, and Kevin in our studio for doing such a great job on the production side of things. As a reminder, this is Town Meeting TV, and you can watch this live in a number of different places and spaces. Comcast channel 1087, Burlington Telecom channel 17 and 217, as well as Town Meeting TV's YouTube page. Kathy and Jean, thank you very much. I think the voters will probably feel very confident going to the polls, knowing who they're voting for and what they're voting for on March the 2nd. Hope everybody makes a good voting plan, gets ready to vote, contact your clerk, be sure you have a plan. Thanks so much for joining us tonight, Kathy and Jean.
Thank you,
Seth. It was nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
That